It should
Oh,
be
yeah.
running now.
Yep.
All right, we're live. Hey,
Yep.
Vjeko,
Hi, Jason.
welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Where do we find you today? I know you've been traveling this week.
Well, I'm actually in Podgorica. It's Montenegro. It's small southeastern European country. So on a business
Interesting.
trip. Traveling as always. Yeah. So
And
NAV projects. Even there.
okay, okay. And earlier this week you were at the Directions EMEA event.
Yes, I've just returned from Vienna. I was there since Monday. So it was a great conference, as Directions is always. You have it once per year, once in Europe, once in US, and it's
Hmm.
always opportunity for Microsoft to actually break news about their latest developments. So
Yeah, and we're hoping to talk about that a little more with you today and get a little perspective on the event and what Microsoft talked about. We were just talking about the high level headlines, I guess you would say, of the event. Obviously, overall, it's the announcement about NAV 2013 R2 and its release plans, as well as some of the key new features and new sort of platform enhancements that are coming out. So I thought we could maybe dive into a few of those. So I guess on the date, it's a late October planned release, which is basically in line with what they had earlier aimed for.
yeah, I would say that release date is more or less where it was expected. They said that it should be released by 31st of October, and they also said it might be a little earlier, but it remains to be seen. But I would say that usually a month, 2 months before the release date, they're pretty accurate. So I would say,
Hmm.
judging from the state of the product at this moment, I would say that it's very likely that we're going to see the release by the end of October.
Hmm. And it's in terms of what they're really announcing that's new and exciting about the release. There were a few things that were highlighted that we were kind of just going over. It was funny because one of them maybe didn't get as much attention at the event. So there was obviously there's better interoperability with Office 365. There's the multi-tenancy, which I think is very interesting to especially to folks who are building and implementing and hosting. And then cache management seems to be one of the feature additions that is getting touted a lot, although I know it's not really
Yeah.
something that's as much on your radar. So maybe we start with the multi-tenancy.
Yeah, maybe we can start with cache management to take it off the table because
Sure.
basically Microsoft has been enhancing features in that area for a while. They have been introducing online payments and similar things. So it's obvious that they have put some effort in there, but the actual focus can be seen in technical areas. So if you compare functional improvements over technical improvements, I must admit that myself, I have completely missed that part. I'm actually I have read the announcement, but I've totally ignored that point which said like cache management improvements because I was focusing on other things which are for me personally more interesting because like NAV is evolving from a small product that it was like 15 years ago when you could be an expert in everything to something that now comprises Azure, Office 365, SQL Server integration with practically all of Microsoft's stack, plus tremendous technical capabilities of integrating with web services. So basically it has grown, just technically it has grown to something completely different than it used to be, and functional as well. So it's very, very difficult to stay in touch with all of those areas. So let's now focus on technical parts, which is where I'm more at home.
Absolutely. So what would your number one highlight be coming out of the event?
Well, I'm kind of divided. So I would certainly say that multi-tenancy is the most major new feature that I've seen, because every new feature has a life cycle. It starts as more or less a proof of concept where you see something that does work, but doesn't quite achieve all of the goals that customers would expect. I would dare saying that, for example, Web Client in 2013 was more or less a proof of concept that is now taking on. So in R2, Web Client is truly improved. It's a completely different product than it used to be. So I would say that from these new features in R2, you also have those features which are kind of, I would say, only starting up, only gaining speed. And I would say that Azure and Office 365 are among these two. The most major feature is certainly multi-tenancy. So it's a new feature, but it really seems, if you ask me, it is #1 feature which is going to fuel growth of NAV over the next period.
What are some of the things you imagine it's going to first be used for? Is it just for simple efficiency gains?
Yeah, the reason why multi-tenancy is important, because architecturally it is the change which makes sure that you can host as many customers as you want with a single application. Earlier, application database used to be integrated deeply in, basically tightly integrated with the database, with the company data, which means if you have 15 different customers, you could technically have them on the same code base, but it actually demanded effort on your side. Yeah. And it was only as simple to actually introduce a change into one of those customers that would not be replicated immediately into other customers, and then you would basically spring from there into multiple directions, which basically ruins your multi-tenant efforts. Right now, architecturally, you have one application database and separate tenants, which are nothing but customer data, which is completely detached from the application. So when you update application for one of those tenants, you are updating it immediately for all of the others, which is basically the cornerstone of fueling growth in cloud deployments. So if you are looking into any large-scale deployment of any product, you need to have similar approach, and now NAV has it. And multi-tenancy features, as they look, I mean, if somebody comes from outside and takes a look at how they work, you could get an impression they have been there since a while. So they wouldn't look like a completely new feature. So they actually look stable. So it's I've had a chance to play a little bit with multi-tenancy, and I think it is really the feature of NAV 2013.
It seems like one of the, I mean, just off the top of my head, it seems like one of the major choices from the way you describe it is, is whether a hosting provider or a partner is going to enforce, a single code base for all their customers, or whether they want to hold on to that flexibility. In terms of and maybe they've addressed this in terms of this customer needs these add-ons that go into their solution, and others different.
Multi-tenancy is not enforced, so you can still decide to have traditional deployments where you have one application database per customer. So nothing forces you to actually use those multi-tenant features. You can enable them or disable them. So NAV is not by itself. Just after you click finish, it's still not multi-tenant. You have to enable multi-tenancy. So you can still choose from any kind of deployment that you can choose earlier from, plus this multi-tenant one. So it doesn't actually interfere with the traditional ways of consuming or deploying NAV.
Okay, it sounds like it has good possibilities for like repeatable industry-specific solutions or supported.
The repeatability is actually it's a motive that is actually it was there in the air. It was talked about. It was discussed a lot. So repeatability is obviously a direction in which Microsoft is going. There are plenty of initiatives within and outside of Microsoft which are actually helping the partner channel understand what repeatability is all about, and also direct efforts by Microsoft to not just point to best practices of repeatability, but also to actually drive repeatability. So multi-tenancy is one of those. So without multi-tenancy as it is designed right now, you couldn't have true repeatability. Now you have it. So, but this is just the first step. So there's going to be more.
Right, and there's obviously going to be some time where partners are ramping up on making a decision, for those who haven't touched it yet, whether or not to take this on, and B, to see how many actually adopt it and exactly how they use it in their businesses and with their clients, right?
Yeah, I would say that there is a kind of a discrepancy between, or actually kind of a gap between current state of the channel in general I'm not talking specifically because there are definitely great partner companies who are following up on all the news and keeping up with the trends. But there is a lot of traditionalism or conservatism in the partner channel. So instead of seeing opportunities, I could have heard a lot of basically partners perceiving this as a threat to their business models, which is kind of expectable. Whenever you have a major partner base or major channel, any kind of disruptive news is going to be perceived as such by I would say, not mainstream, but larger parts of that channel. So this is happening with NAV, but it's certainly not stopping Microsoft or the channel in moving forward. Definitely, it's going to be a big challenge for most of partners how to transform from an environment where NAV was sold primarily on-premise, where implementations were actually done one by one in a sequence where you probably had a customer per year or 3 customers per year, but certainly not hundreds of customers per year. So architectural changes, functional changes, the general direction which you can see NAV is going is hinting that Microsoft is serious about going basically for the long tail of the market, for smaller customers, for faster implementation cycles, more productivity features of the application that can actually be attractive to smaller customers, not primarily focusing on application or core ERP functionality.
And making it part of the larger sort of services and business solution story from Microsoft, right? I mean, the Office 365 integration, from watching the event from the outside, seemed to be one of Microsoft's major talking points. Was that something they really focused on at the event and telling that story?
I would say that Office 365 was really one of the topics that was most discussed. So a lot of people discussed it. Microsoft was extremely excited about it, and what I can say right now from my personal experience, it's a great new addition, it's a great new feature. It's I kind of still do not fully perceive what is the actual intention or what is the actual direction. Some features have been demonstrated, and certainly there was also a white paper on Office 365 integration. So it was possible also earlier to integrate NAV with Office 365. It's obvious that Microsoft wants to be there. I would just dare saying, personally, my opinion is they are still finding where exactly they want to be with that. But if they want to be there, yes. When? As soon as possible. What they want to achieve there, as much as possible. So, but what is going to find its way into final release of R2 and also what's going to be their strategy there, I really couldn't say. The information shared and all of discussions, it's just too hazy for me to actually be able to say exactly where it is heading. But it certainly is a strategy. It's not just kind of tactical movement. It is a strategy. They're exploring that seriously.
Interesting. I mean, from what I had seen, it did look like a much more comprehensive or comprehensible story about what it meant to access at least some elements of NAV as an Office 365 user. And it seemed to focus on, and maybe this, it seemed to focus on kind of the BI and the KPI as kind of perspective that someone could go in through Office 365, access some maybe subset of NAV data. Maybe it wasn't the actual client.
Judging from the demo, if you take a look at the demo, basically you have Office 365, which includes your unstructured data, and also you have NAV structured data blended in. And it's pretty transparent for the end user, which means like end user doesn't really need to care where does information come from. Is it a document, or is it an Excel worksheet, or is it actually an NAV record? I would say that it was a proof of concept more than anything else. So I wouldn't say it's actual functionality which is going to see much runtime in the first release, but it's hinting where they are, or at least which direction they are exploring. So I'm not quite sure. They certainly want to be there. They certainly want to enable their customers to buy a single product, to be able to use a platform, not thinking this is Office part, this is NAV part, this is, I don't know, mail part. It is one product, but there are so many questions to be answered before that. So first is like deployment options that you have currently, or at least theoretically, you could link this Office 365 to any kind of deployment, Azure or on-prem, if you have capabilities to actually expose all the necessary metadata and data. So. Then there is licensing. So how do you? I mean, there are so many answers, more questions than answers. So I would say that leaving Directions, I didn't have a clear picture like what exactly Office 365 is going to be, but it certainly will be there.
I mean, they talked about what was it? Authentication through Office 365. Was that significant to you?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Authentication through Office 365.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a major thing. It was obvious from NAV 2013 already that they are aiming for different authentication methods. So I wouldn't be surprised if it would be possible soon to authenticate to NAV using your Facebook account or any other of generally accepted authentication providers. So I would say Office 365 or actually Microsoft Live IDs, they are probably going to be there, but I wouldn't say it's a big feature. So it's kind of just one of possible ways to authenticate against NAV now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took it as part of them trying to build sort of a larger story around the Office 365 experience and getting NAV as closely into that as they could, at least in the positioning, and authentication seemed to be one maybe piece of that puzzle to say, you log in once and you're in that, you're using your NAV data, you're using your Office 365 other solutions. That's how I perceived it. So okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's basically that. It's just one of those many features, but it's certainly not the core feature of Office 365 integration. What looking from a possible end customer perspective, what I would like to have as an end customer is one system which basically allows me to do all of my work in a single place, which keeps my data secure, which keeps my data at one place, which also possibly keeps redundant copies of my data that I can access from everywhere, and that I do not have to worry much about what kind of technology, what kind of architecture is behind. And Office 365 itself has done a great deal of progress in that direction already. So for most customers who are using Office 365, it looks like a single coherent whole, for better part of it. And now it's just a question how NAV is going to be integrated into that. Yeah. Because it's still, I would say, a difficult question. Like Office 365 is generally about maintaining, generating, managing unstructured data like emails, like documents, like various lists, whatnot. Whereas NAV is structured data, business processes, actually information that you have to extract from that. So I would say that we can expect a lot of changes, a lot of probably changes of direction over the next several releases as far as Office 365 is.
Certainly an evolving story anyway. Microsoft's story that's telling is certainly evolving in terms of how they envision the ideal sort of interaction between those various pieces. You mentioned the web client and some real maturity there. Was there anything else in that area that's sort of worth noting right now?
I would say that you have much more flexibility with deploying web client right now. In terms of authentication, for example, it's much easier to deploy a web client using different sorts of authentication rather than just your Active Directory authentication. Then the user interface, or as people like to call it, experience nowadays, it's completely revamped, so it really looks like Office 365. So if you're familiar with Office 365 interface, you will immediately be familiar with NAV. So that's major improvements. I would say that from end user perspective, it's kind of more user friendly. So it's less fumbling with the UX and more of actual productive work, I would say. So less clicking around So less clicks to achieve the same thing. It's still the same pages, the same metadata. It's just that obviously they had much more time available. They had probably more resources allocated to it. So it has really been done the proper way around.
Mm-hmm. And this had been set as the beginning of the sort of 1 year release cycles going forward.
Yep.
Does that sound like they're aiming to keep that up going into 2014? From what you heard?
I don't really know, because it's for me. I mean, if we take a look at the direction where Microsoft wants to take NAV, which is the cloud. It's very difficult to talk about releases or release cycles in the cloud. Basically, you have a product which you keep updating, keep maintaining. So you don't have Facebook V1 or V2 or V2013. It's just Facebook, and it was one steady progression from whatever it was 5-6 years ago to what it is today. And regarding those release cycles, I mean, the product will go through that, certainly, but if it's going to be yearly release cycles, they have been able to keep more or less with the promise, at least with the R2. The problem is that kind of what they said last year was one big release every year, or actually one major release every year, which would mean like we could have expected NAV 2014, but it was still NAV 2013 R2. Now does it have to do with their life cycle policy preferences to keep it like 2013, like just an update for a current version, or is it some other strategy in the background? But this, from functionality perspective, is a major release, regardless of the fact it's actually just R2 of existing version. There are so many technical news that it can't be just perceived as a minor update to an existing version. So if they keep up this pace, they will certainly be able to deliver one release of this type per year. But sooner or later, when they hit Azure goals, whichever they are again, they will have to move to some kind of continuous pattern, like just continuously upgrading the solution without some specific set release cycles.
Yeah.
But this is just, it's just my guessing or thinking aloud. It's nothing confirmed or denied or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we're seeing, I've been talking to folks on the CRM side, having a Microsoft-hosted CRM online versus partner-hosted options, and then obviously on-premise. When major releases come out with major changes in them, you are basically in one of three positions. You can choose to implement it yourself on-premise. You can work with your hosting partner if you have one in terms of timing the rollout of updates. If you're on CRM Online where Microsoft's dictating the pace, much as it might be if Microsoft were hosting an ERP solution, they're going to start rolling something out, and they can't not roll it out because they know they have another release coming 6 months or a year down the line.
Yeah, well, I can't really comment on that because we need to first see how it would look like. But I would say that once you hit the cloud, Microsoft focus is going to be technical more than functional. So I don't expect that they would be focusing significant efforts into making core ERP functionality more comprehensive. They would probably go for making platform more user-friendly, more versatile, more integratable. That would be their goal, and that just seems logical. So I would say that when NAV is in Azure finally, Microsoft's releases would not interfere with the functionality. So they would bring more client features, they would bring more maybe mobility features or any other kinds of features that remain to be seen. But I wouldn't expect that they would do major functionality, application functionality upgrades that would disrupt your customer base. Because right now, when you have a new release, the problem is not the shell, the infrastructure, the architecture of the application. The problem is the application itself, the business logic, which is the data model that has changed between releases. That is what is making upgrades complicated, not the technical stuff. So if Microsoft keeps focusing on technical stuff, I would say that this risk is effectively mitigated.
Okay. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about, sort
Yeah,
of beyond
maybe we should
the partner
maybe
hosting?
maybe we should discuss Azure a little bit
Yeah.
because like we have been mentioning it a couple of times, but it just didn't go go to the core. I would say that still the Azure story is not completely clear. So right now what we get is some help, some infrastructure functionality which streamlines deployment in Azure, but also it's not just focusing on Azure. It is called Azure, but it's for anybody who wants to do cloud deployment. So there is nothing significant which is Azure specific that you couldn't run in your own cloud. Like if you decide to do hosting, you could also use all of that Azure functionality to actually help your business model. So I would say that they are still in the virtual machine domain. So what you get is a virtual instance which runs NAV. So that is not that's really not a breakthrough news. What is going to be breakthrough news is when you will have NAV on worker role in Azure. And it's still, it remains to be seen if they are going to do that or when, because it's not even discussed. So right now Azure is about virtual machines, which means like it's not Azure, it's any kind of cloud. So Microsoft is not actually taking away from any partner who has invested significantly into hosting or cloud offerings. They're basically helping them.
Right. And why else would they need, sort of like you said, the sort of more native Azure architecture to run NAV if it wasn't Microsoft itself sort of taking that role? Why not just give partners multi-tenancy, give them virtual machines, and let them manage it as they see fit, scaling it as they see fit?
I would say that this is a difficult question because it depends a lot on Microsoft's choice. So is Microsoft going to be the provider of the ERP application functionality, or are they going to leave that to the partner channel? So far, Microsoft has been providing the application, but not the business logic. So it has left this to partners, so partners could decide to specialize in certain verticals, to address certain market niches. And now the question is, if Microsoft wants to sell NAV consistently, they have to take a clear direction. Like, do they want to focus on a single vertical? Do they want to focus on a specific market segment? Because NAV is very horizontal. It's, I would say, a little bit too horizontal for any company to just accept. So almost everybody is customizing NAV. So if Microsoft decides to actually go for direct sales of NAV without any kind of dependency on partner channel, it would mean that they would have to have a complete offering, which is a vertical offering. And now the question is, which vertical, which geographies, and so I would say these are all very, very difficult questions that Microsoft doesn't either have an answer or doesn't want to. I mean, they're not disclosing anything like that. But I would say, even though they are not discussing that publicly, these are the questions that must be answered before they can take any move there. So the most logical thing they can do is what they are actually doing, basically enable partners to do what they're best at, providing vertical functionality to their already formed markets.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And in terms of giving partners tools in Azure, that's what they're doing, and it makes sense given the points you mentioned. There's so many variables, there's so many different segments of a market that require different changes to the system, different approaches. Language, from everything from language and localization.
Language is the easiest of all. I mean, translating into Chinese or Indonesian is, I mean, it doesn't take so much time, but adapting it to legislation, to specific accounting rules, to I don't know, tax rules, reporting rules. I mean, those are real challenges when going with any ERP or any business solution which is close to finance management as NAV is. It basically is a finance management solution, among other things. So you cannot just decide, let's go to this or that country. You have to do a lot of work before you can be able to do that.
Well, if I had to guess, I would say that the plans with a hosted version of AX that appears to probably be coming from Microsoft sometime in maybe 2014 or a little beyond that, will likely be a test case if I had to guess in terms of Microsoft getting some experience hosting ERP in some way, and whether that filters down, they take the lessons learned from that and apply them to NAV. We'll see. But I
Yep.
think before that, I wouldn't expect any
Yeah, I
change if I
can't
had to
really
come up.
draw any parallels with
Yeah,
AX.
yeah.
I've been following what's happening in there, so.
All right. The other thing I picked up on coming out of the event was, there were sessions pushing the idea of new apps, new interfaces for NAV in the future, and the desire to have the partner channel, develop those. Did you pick up on that?
I have been following it a little bit, but not too deep. So
Okay.
there certainly are. This is direction. So basically, if you take a look at architecture of NAV, it has allowed partners to do that already. So now, if Microsoft is going to do some further steps to make it simpler for partners, I can't know. But I would say very likely something is going to happen. If you take a look at NAV 2013, OData was introduced as a read-only data source. So you could just connect, for example, Excel to OData. You could connect, for example, a Windows 8 app to OData and have like a native-looking experience or device experience using very, very simple architecture in behind. So Microsoft is already paving its path in this direction, like of making NAV open enough to be consumed by various sources. Now, if Microsoft is going to do something themselves, I can't really say. I don't know, but what we see in 2013 is a different. If I'm not mistaken, OData is now not just read-only, which enables much more flexibility in connecting to it. So I would say that making any third-party apps or device experiences for NAV is going to be much simpler than it used to be. But what can we expect from Microsoft and when? I would say let's sit and wait.
Yeah, I mean the thing I was most interested in was, and I'll have to dig for the blog post where I read this, was it seemed to be some encouragement from Microsoft to its partners to start thinking about doing more themselves to extend the base app, extend NAV with extra apps for different use cases, whether it's on tablets or mobile, or for certain worker roles.
I mean, obviously, the initiative by Microsoft to encourage partners to do that has been there for a while, but it always just depends on what Microsoft provides to you. Because before web services, it was very difficult to do anything. Then with web services, it was much easier to do many different things with OData, with .NET interoperability, with client extensions that are now actually working in web client as well. You get a lot of more opportunities. So Microsoft is certainly encouraging partners to invest there. Yeah, but what part of strategy does it constitute for Microsoft? It's a different thing altogether. So I don't know that.
Okay, I guess the last thing I really wanted to touch on and get your input on was something I believe you've been involved in, which is the Partner Ready Software Initiative.
Yep.
And I know that there was quite a bit of work going into that before this event. Anything you want to share there?
Well, I could say that yes, I have been a member of the Partner Ready Software Initiative since 1 year ago, and the initiative is about enabling, or actually educating partners about the best practices in NAV, about the patterns in NAV that they should apply to make their solutions repeatable, manageable, upgradable, and everything else that they should strive for. So Partner Ready Software has been doing a lot of, I would say, evangelizing in the channel. We have been around different conferences, including Directions, including Tech Days, presenting and opening basically our approaches to discussion. And it's basically not an IP. It's something that is open to public. I wouldn't say I couldn't say is it public domain or anything, but it's certainly some kind of body of best practices that is open for discussion and improvement. And what I would say is the best development ever since PRS started is that Microsoft has caught on with their patents initiative. So what they have decided to do is dissect NAV, identify the patterns inside, because identifying the patterns is the first step in achieving repeatability, because if you don't understand the patterns that are in there, you cannot create a repeatable solution. You're just going to fall into the same traps, like multiplying this, duplicating the code all over the places. So Microsoft is now actively basically taking the lead in this patterns initiative. So and that part was also represented at the conference. So.
How would you gauge the interest of folks who are learning about it at the event who aren't sort of actively engaged? Are they,
yes, absolutely. So I would say that the partner channel is excited about that. They want to learn about that. They want to adapt to the best practices, because as soon as you hit certain number of customers, upgrading or maintaining your customer base at the latest version is increasingly more difficult. And with PRS or any other best practices initiative which aims for repeatability, you can reduce your upgrade times significantly. I've got reports that certain customers have been upgraded in 3 days, whereas a similar effort would take a couple of months earlier. So that's.
Is it more applicable to implementers as opposed to ISVs, do you think, or is there a role for both parties?
I would say it's for both. So if you are an ISV, you certainly must make sure to make your solution easy to implement. So if you have a solution which integrates with NAV but violates all of the rules of, like, the best practices of integration, then you make your solution very difficult to integrate. Also, if you have multiple ISV solutions, which is an increasing occurrence, it becomes even more difficult. So how do you integrate two completely opposite or different solutions which approach integration and customization in two completely different ways, and then how do you maintain that together with new releases of NAV? I would say that it is catching on with both ISVs who want to learn what are the best ways of developing the software so that it can be easily deployed and maintained, and also for the regular value-added resellers who are simply customizing their solutions but still want them to be upgradable to next version and maintainable over the long run.
All right. Well, cool. So what's next for you? Do you have any more events in your schedule for the year or for the fall?
Yes, I will certainly be in Nashville. So it's in less than a month now, or actually in exactly a month. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also participating in the Tech Days in Antwerp. So these are the upcoming events for this year. I'm not aware of anything else that catches my interest. So. Okay.
Well, yeah, maybe after the U.S. event, we can have you back with a couple of the other folks we had been planning with a couple months ago, and we can do another one of these.
Yeah, maybe it would be good to actually invite a couple of more folks to discuss those very interesting new topics, like brainstorm over what could be possible strategy or possible direction. And certainly what I could suggest is to have a PRS hangout with all members of the PRS team and discuss what is the aims, what is the goal and strategy, what is the current state of
especially now that it sounds like it has more momentum now that it's hooked up with this Microsoft R&D effort, which sounds like a great place for them to be, or for you guys to be, in your efforts, right?
Yep, that's true.
All right. Well, why don't we end it there? Vjeko, thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's a little later there, and thanks for updating us all on your experiences at the event. I believe this will be recorded, and we'll probably make it available afterwards.
Yep.
So
thank you.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.